Brought you nearly a month ago about illegal dumping at Spring Lake Park. People were throwing out trash in the bushes and parking lots, everything from couches to tires and roofing material. First Alert 6 Zina Taher joins us live tonight. Now, Zina, Omaha police made their first arrest in the case.
Yeah, Jacqueline, that's right. So when we brought you this story in August, Omaha's Parks Department's operations supervisors said they were in a catch-22 trying to solve this problem. Now, police have added temporary cameras scattered around parts of the park. Those cameras captured one person dumping who was arrested. They won't tell us where the cameras are or how many there are in the area, but they said they decided to install them after realizing there's an increase in littering this summer. They placed them in spots where they were finding items and areas people were traveling through to dump those items. Steve Meister, captain of the Southeast Omaha Police Precinct, says long-term, they don't just want to make arrests. They want to stop this from happening altogether.
We do want to have this area stay clean, let people come here, enjoy it as they should be, and not have it turn into a dumping zone.
He also says the cameras are a force multiplier. He says on the daily, his patrols are heading down to Spring Lake and checking that camera footage. He's hoping the cameras deter people from dumping and that they'll choose to use donation centers or take advantage of the fall cleanup initiative in Omaha. That happens next month. We'll have more information on those fall cleanup dates in this story on our website at firstalert6.com. And in terms of long-term solutions for dumping, the police department does want to invest in long-term cameras instead of those temporary ones. They'd have better quality and they could be left at the park year-round. In the studio, Zina Taher, First Alert 6.
All right.